there are plenty of things you can do that will not make the girl walk away thinking you're unattractive, but they will just make the girl walk away. Today's question is an interesting one, so let's just roll right into it. What are the most common verbal behaviors that are unattractive to women, i.e. self-deprecating, humor, too agreeable? I know I should adopt a high-value frame, but it could help to identify my low-value behaviors. So he mentions self-deprecation or self-deprecating humor. He mentions being too agreeable. Those fall under a category of behavior I call having a bad frame, right? Having a negative view of yourself. Being too agreeable is a reflection on the idea that you don't think you can get through life while breaking rapport. You're too scared to do so because you think too little of yourself. And bad frames specifically could be taking frames such that aren't even like necessarily low value, but just low effectiveness, like the frame that sex is not common between men and women. It may not be low value for you, but it's low value for the likelihood of sex happening, for example. A low value bad frame could be the frame that it's natural and normal for men to pursue women, right? Maybe it's not low value about you particularly, but it's certainly low value about men, and it's really, really gonna hurt you. But anything that's in this category of bad frames, frames that are not useful in game. Now, debatably, these are not actually verbal behaviors because they're a reflection of your inner state or your inner psychology, but they are manifested verbally. So these are all in the category that he mentions. However, there is another category verbally that is probably way more unattractive than this, and it's relatively common as well, which is what I call it just ain't right, or an incongruence issue. So things like some guys in game go out of their way to be polarizing, and it comes off like they're trying to be offensive. It's not like they're being edgy and polarizing. It comes off like they're trying to be assholes, right? They're trying to be a dick, and girls like, why did you walk up to me to be a dick? Why did you walk up to me to insult me? It's just incongruent. It doesn't make any sense, and it's just something just off with it. Another incongruent behavior would be not pausing ever, right? Just no pauses. I just keep talking. I don't let you talk anywhere, and I just go and go. And this is often a result of nervousness or something like that. But it's just incongruent. There's just something off about it because this is not the way a normal person talks. Anything that comes off as just inherently abnormal or weird is going to get you an immediate negative response, because if you are abnormal or weird, number one, people don't like associating with that, but number two, people will assume you're abnormal or weird because of some kind of agenda or some kind of deep-seated insecurity, or it's a manifestation of some negative belief you have. So that's another type of category. But if you really want to talk about the verbal behaviors you would like to remove, I think you want to alter one word in the question, because he said what are verbal behaviors that are unattractive to women. Really the question I would ask if you're looking for common bad verbal behaviors are what are the verbal behaviors that are ineffective in game, whether or not they're unattractive. There are plenty of things you can do that will not make the girl walk away thinking you're unattractive, but they will just make the girl walk away, which is just as bad. And why I include this is that all of these other things are things you have to actively do. You have to actively take on a bad frame. You have to actively be incongruent. You have to actively be offensive. Most of the verbal game errors, the most common ones, are not sins of commission, but sins of omission. What I see over and over again with students, almost every boot camp, is guys who are perfectly fine in terms of they don't do anything embarrassing in their conversation. They don't do anything overtly uncool. They don't do anything outright weird, but the problem is they just don't do anything. They end up in these inert platonic interactions that don't go anywhere. They don't make it man to woman. They don't create any tension. They don't make the conversation interesting. And they basically bore the girl into ending the conversation. All right, so that is actually the biggest verbal game mistake, is a lack of the important things that the set needs, right? It's not that most guys are weirding girls out, creeping girls out, turning girls off. It's that they're not turning girls on. It's that they're boring them to death, right? So this focus on what are the bad verbal things that I can avoid, for most people is actually the opposite of what you want to be doing, because this idea that I want to avoid the bad behaviors is actually putting you in more a mode of censoring yourself, a mode of trying to self-monitor, and that's creating the bigger problem, which is the lack of taking risks, the lack of making it interesting, the lack of making it exciting. So yes, if you do on an ongoing basis have situations where a girl seems to really like you and then suddenly get turned off, certainly work on correcting that. And if you do have situations where you are creating a bad frame and then seeing the negative fruits of that bad frame later on, absolutely eliminate that negative frame. But for most of you, the key to good verbal game is not self-monitoring and figuring out what your mistakes are. The key to good verbal game is taking more risks and just not being boring. Because the average guy is just boring and average. He's not awful, he's not unattractive, he's not creepy, he's just boring and average. And that is the number one thing to avoid, because that's the number one thing that guys do wrong. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got a lot out of it. Remember to submit your questions here on the channel and also to questions@toddvdating.com, because that's where I get the material for this channel. Look forward to seeing you on the next video and maybe even answering your question. Take care. See you next time.